Hey guys, welcome back to the Badge and Beyond. Today we're talking about something fairly topical, which is DV and bail laws. Something that's been in the news a lot, quite frequently, unfortunately, because of the number of offenders that have been given bail and have then gone back to commit serious assaults and even murder on their intimate partners. Now, obviously, Danny, having worked in DV for much of your time in the cops and still being a guest lecturer on that, and ourselves doing a lot of work with frontline workers and also just lecturing on the different ways we see people committing these offences and how they're using technology to engage their victims. Look, I guess the big thing is, can you help people understand some of what's behind bail and AVOs, how they work together, and where you think some of the downfalls are?
Look, DV or domestic violence is a very complex topic. Especially when it comes to how it goes into criminal investigation, and then the psychology behind intervention strategies and what can we do. I suppose the first thing I'd suggest we all need to acknowledge is I don't think we've found a way to do this right.
100%.
And the easiest way to demonstrate that is the stats haven't changed. You've still got at least one woman per week dead because of DV. And that's been the case for, going back as far as they started taking those stats in the first place. We have had changes to the Act. We've had amendments, we've had repeals, we've had money thrown at services, but I don't think we've ever had a proper intervention change to do that. So right now, again, the topic is what's been happening to bail. Most recent change to AVOs was putting them into plain English and all this kind of other stuff. But realistically, even when the first change happened in the Crimes Act for the domestic and personal AVOs, all it did was basically consolidate offences to be DV related. So all of a sudden, instead of an assault, you could have a domestic violence assault, right? And all it did was codify domestic violence there. There was no added sentencing because it was a domestic violence offence. All it did was just name it as a DV offence. There was a lot of question as to what did this really achieve besides some kind of election promise that kept people happy initially because they didn't understand what it did. And here we are again, looking at what we're doing to bail, and there'll be a presumption against bail for DV related offences and all that kind of stuff. And I think right now the way the system has worked is police go investigate an allegation of domestic violence, whether that's an assault, whether that's coercion, whether that's stalking, whether it's whatever it is. And if it satisfies the threshold of a criminal offence and we can charge, they arrest, they charge, a provisional AVO or an urgent AVO is made at the time immediately with it, especially if there's an offence. If we don't hit the threshold to be able to successfully charge the person, then if it hits the threshold for an AVO, on the balance of probabilities, then again you'll either get an urgent AVO or you'll get a non-urgent or an application for an AVO. And without getting into all the technical side of the equation, basically you're going to get a series of constraints, including your basic human rights, which are not to assault, molest, threaten, harass anybody, which you can't do anyway. Some people need a piece of paper to tell them that, to remind them. And then you can have other, exclusion orders that can stop you from going within certain distances or certain premises, and also managing your behaviour when it comes to contact. Now, what people usually don't understand is having an AVO on you only is not a criminal record, and it's not a criminal offence to have an AVO on you. It's if you decide to breach that AVO that you now commit a criminal offence.
And look, if we look at this from a very practical standpoint, a piece of paper does not protect you. If someone is willing to threaten, molest, intimidate, harass, in the first place, assault you, having a piece of paper that tells you not to do it like it's against the law, and everybody knows it's against the law.
Yeah.
It really doesn't prevent. For those people that we're seeing becoming offenders, it doesn't prevent anything.
Yep.
You know, that's the thing, and I think the difficulty is that the bail laws. I mean, you and I have both seen people charged or being brought in, given an AVO, walk out and get...
See you soon.
Yeah, they're back in. I've seen a guy turn around in like half hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Like enough time to go home,
Breach the
punch
order.
his wife,
Yep.
have the neighbours call, we're back there and bring you straight back. And I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
You
Yep.
cannot understand the mindset of these people.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
exactly right.
That's the issue we're talking about. For some offenders, and for a lot of offenders, if you're willing to commit one offence, breaching AVO means nothing.
Yep.
So then the bail laws become very important. But I guess the concern is, you know, it leaves you open to who are those people that are being... Now, at what point does someone become such a risk that there is no presumption in favour of bail?
Yeah.
And then you have the concern around those people that there's a misunderstanding, or there's the system's being manipulated, and no one wants to have innocent people put in jail, but no one wants to have the opposite occur when we've got innocent people being murdered. It's a shit circumstance.
It is, and the problem with it is it's one of those very rare parts of law where it doesn't apply to almost any other criminal offence, where you can sort of, on your discretion, to an extent, you have to reasonably suspect something might have happened, is imminent, or has happened, in terms of any kind of domestic violence scenario. And it's usually one word against the other. Mm-hmm. That's a really tough call with evidence when it comes for a police officer to make a decision on what to do. Because most of the times, there's no witness.
Yep.
There's no independent witness to this scenario. And when there are, sometimes it's the children, which is not great to put a kid in that scenario. That's if they're old enough to even be able to express themselves. And it's not one of these things you're going to find on CCTV generally. Right? Not many people have CCTV inside the house.
That's right.
And if you do, you're an interesting kind of person. Right? Entertainment for everyone. But I think because of how significant and how devastating the stats are when it comes to what can happen when we get it wrong, we're erring on the side of caution, where we're going to give an AVO and manage this behaviour. But, you know, in many circles, it's a box-ticking exercise. The cop's like, I don't want to... the old saying, I don't want to end up at coroner's court having to explain why I didn't take out an AVO, when the only difference would have been he just would have killed her with the AVO. That's
right. And I think to say, my understanding of many of the recent cases is it's magistrates releasing people on bail.
Yep.
And, you know, there's been talk about ankle monitoring and things like that, like ankle bracelets and monitoring people. Like, well, that's fantastic, but we know that occurs for different customers of corrective services, and they still get time they're allowed to go to the shops. They've got an hour to go out of a day, and people don't always monitor everything, and there's lapses in this and that.
But even what is it? It just, like I was saying to someone, what does it do? I'll tell you what it does.
You will track someone to the house of the victim. And when they commit their murder, you're like, okay, well, good.
Yeah,
we've got more evidence of a homicide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And realistically, how many people get away with DV homicide? Mm-hmm. Very few.
No, that's right.
Right, very few. So it's not like it's one of those crimes where you can never work out who did it, or find the guy.
Yeah.
Right.
I think 80% of homicides are committed by someone known to the victim. So
so throwing the resources at this is going to achieve what? Are you looking at better prosecution rates?
Yeah.
How's that impacting DV in terms of early intervention?
And you have the other side of that where, in the last episode, we were talking about, you know, baby reindeer and things, but you have that point where the victim is, you know, you talk about trauma bonding and things like that, where the victim goes back to the offender at times.
Yeah.
And then presents themselves as not a willing victim, but they're there, a lamb to the slaughter in the worst kind of use of the word, if that makes sense. So the point is, it's such a dynamic thing to work with, and yet, I mean, let's look at the resourcing phase of it. There's not enough space in MRRC here in New South Wales to hold
Yeah.
Everybody that's got an AVO against them and is facing a charge.
Yeah.
And, when does the person that's rung up and made threats over the phone, are they the person that's going to go and kill their spouse or former spouse? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because the risk assessment, we're talking off statistics, but of course that time that there's not everybody moves in line with the statistics, right? There's always the outlier.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what the answer is. I think in some respects society really, we need to go back to the expectation around individuals as, look, I just don't know where this idea of this behaviour has ever been right or wrong, or it certainly wasn't something that I was raised with in my house.
Yep.
I'm sure it wasn't with you, but it's about other people in community, the community as a whole, addressing, when you see, I get the shit something chronic when I see people talking about, like, someone does something or talks badly about their wife in a particular way or their spouse, and the other guy's like, yeah. I'm like, no, well, you know what? No, I won't do that.
Yeah, that locker room conversations.
Yeah.
That comes up actually a bit for me in different circles, but a lot of this is how a person treats their other half. And in looking at language, like if we start with language, if you're calling, for example, let's go husband and wife, I'm calling her my partner. Right? What is a partner?
Yeah.
Partner, by its own definition, is equality, right? If you're my partner, whether you're at work or in business or in any aspect, if you're my partner or doubles partner in tennis, right, you're an equal player with me, right?
Yep.
As we go through whatever aspect of life where we're partners in. In domestic violence relationships, there are no partnerships.
Yeah.
Okay? It's master-slave relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you're looking at it from that point of view, the relationship at the outset is wrong. For me, the intervention strategies need to tackle that. So this is where I'm talking school programs,
Yep.
right? Interventions where we are teaching human beings on how they should relate to one another when it comes to entering a relationship.
So, think about this. You get caught for drunk driving. What do? They strip your license off you and do whatever.
Yep.
But they'll send you to like classes like Alcoholics Anonymous or
Yep.
something like a driving offender kind of school to help you modify your behaviour.
Yes.
Where's the psychological intervention for someone that's clearly got a screw loose
Yep.
and a misunderstanding, or their psychology is so screwed up
Yep.
that they think that's appropriate? Why are we not looking at that? Because you've already come to our attention.
Yep.
And that behaviour is not going to change generally.
Yep.
And if there is something that's triggering that, helping to understand what that is and give you coping mechanisms, whilst you're also going through the justice system.
Yes.
To make sure that you are punished appropriately and to make sure that an example is set. But how many times do we see a DV offender commit, they break up with one partner they've been a DV offender with, they go to the next partner and they commit offences against them, and then again and again. And that's the only way they know how to operate, or the only way they like operating. So you either have to change their psychology or you, I don't know, put a muzzle on them, so to speak.
I'll tell you what I think. This is my wonderful cynical view of DV intervention strategy. What we do is we throw millions and millions of dollars at victim services. So what we'll do, we'll throw money to have more available rooms for refuges. We'll throw money for frontline DV services. Now, don't get me wrong. As you know, I'm a big proponent for this sector.
Necessary. Yeah.
Absolutely. But that in isolation of anything else does nothing to stop this from happening.
Everything is reactive, nothing is proactive.
So, and I'll tell you why it's problematic for government. Because government sits in short terms. And I can give an election promise and say, I'm going to put $17 million into domestic violence services. How am I going to do that in that term? I throw money at the victim services. Why? Because if I'm going to actually do offender programs and behaviour change programs, they're not going to turn around in 1 to 2, 3 years.
That's right.
You're not going to get the data that you need. Well, you can say, I have housed 300 women and children every month for blah, 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 and that's my sort of, here's my key KPI. For you to effectively change a mindset for a DV offender, it takes years. And whether it's cognitive behavior therapy or any kind of intervention strategy that's going to be long-term and meaningful, it's expensive. It needs proper work, and we need to get the right data. And you're not going to be able to come back in a year and say, hey, all you can be able to show is there was no reported violence in that 12 months time, for example, right? And that could be attributed to whatever.
When you've got a number is 0 versus a number of, like you said, how many people I've housed, what looks better?
100%.
100%.
And if no one is willing to change this, we will continue to have statistics that we have. And that's the huge issue. When you go to a high school and you've got 16-year-old boys and girls and you're running scenarios at them, which we do, whether it comes to consent-based assaults, sexual assaults, healthy relationships and bad relationships. What are those? How did kids from that age differentiate between the two? It's very disturbing what mainly women think is okay, right? And also think is their fault.
And you raise a good point, because I know I've seen it. I'm sure you would have seen it. How many times have you seen male offenders committing offences, but mum and dad, but often I've seen it, mum is like uber defensive of son. And then I go back and I'm like, oh, okay, is she a victim of domestic violence? But there's no record of it. To see it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm saying that, there's this point out there of, hey, men have to, deal with men's violence and all the rest of this, and I get that.
Yep.
But society has to deal with violence as a whole.
Yes.
And mothers have a very important part to play, and that in raising their sons. Raising sons to understand, how to act with a woman, and fathers have to do that as well. Don't get me wrong, but you're setting the example. You know what I mean? What you accept at home is what the child sees is appropriate. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand there's all levels of dimension to that, but when there's apparently no DV, and you see this like a mum excusing the behaviour of a son, sometimes that's encouragement to that offender.
It's enabling. But I think what I saw, and this is where I would have my controversy, because I would denounce the word sisterhood. And I said, I don't believe there is a sisterhood. Because in my experience, in the most serious aspects where you need sisterhood the most, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And DV was one of those things. I would go every Thursday to Bankstown Court, have up to 97 AVOs on my list. And I would see defendant after defendant with a whole tribe turning up to court for him. And this woman would sit by herself every single time. It was just us with her, a support agency, the domestic violence officer, the prosecutor. That's it. And many times she would have female members of her own family sitting with the husband.
On the other side, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And we would, it was something I really wanted to sort of probe and look into. And just listening to our victims' stories about how other women treated them and what they would say to them, and the shaming and the further isolation. And for me, the diagnostic tool I would use to see if someone's in a domestic violence relationship is isolation. Does he isolate you? And how does he do that? Because to me, isolation is, for me, one of the best ways to diagnose DV.
And really one of the very early kind of indicators.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to hide, right? That's a strategy 101 if you're going to be a DV sort of offender. You isolate her from her support network, right? And then the biggest problem then became her own support network would isolate her themselves.
Yeah.
And you would see this even when I was doing high school workshops. I would see the girls time after time stop talking to their friend because ever since she got this guy, she doesn't doesn't deal with us, doesn't come to anything anymore, doesn't respond to us, doesn't do anything, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, that is the worst thing you can do for her, especially when you think the guy she's with is trash.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'd say, I'm talking to these year 10, year 11 girls, and they're like, he's such a, this and that. He's very disrespectful. He talks to her this way. He keeps her away from us. I'm like, yeah, you'd see, instead of finding her an idiot for doing what she's doing and like she's betrayed you, but she's forgotten the girls, she's going to need that lifeline back to you.
Yep.
Right? Because on the other side, there really is a brotherhood. Right?
Yeah,
Men look after men in many scenarios that aren't always the greatest. Right?
Yeah.
The bro code and so forth. And it's a very real thing. Right? You know that if someone's going to pick up the phone and call and say something, you're going to have my back. Like I won't have to worry about that. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, if someone calls Anthony and says blah blah blah, I know regardless of what's happening, you'll have my back. I don't have to worry about that. I don't believe women have that, and I see that in the most serious aspects, right? I have seen mothers at the behest of their daughters look after the son, then look after the son-in-law more than look after the daughter, right? And it's just this thing we've got that, for whatever reason, over time, there's been this breakdown that a woman's belief that she needs to preserve certain aspects, and it usually favours the man, right? And that's why men get away with a lot of crap as well. Yeah. See, I found, even as much as we would talk about how a positive male to a son is so important to a young boy, right? So important, because it can just be disaster when it's not. And so people would say, blame the father for raising a DV offender, but so many single mums raise DV offenders.
Yeah, yeah.
So many.
Yep.
So you're like, what's happening there? And
They
again,
kinda,
that conversation.
Yeah, it's like they're raising, as a single mum, somehow they lavish all their attention on the kid and they never say no and they never do anything, and that leads down a dangerous path. Yeah. And then they see, the way the mother's relationship is with other men and what she accepts, and, that's... Yeah, it's so... Wow, there's a whole...
There's a whole thing there.
Yeah.
And for me, when we do the work and continue to work in this space, the blame shifting is huge. So I would say to a lot of people, like, okay, after dealing with so many DV offenders, interviewing thousands, it's amazing how you could reduce the answers to their questions and reduce them to a script, because it was always the same crap. And that's why I find it, like, I don't think the courts, one of the reasons our court system's quite good, I would say, is because when you have a judge that's seen case after case after case and hearing the same diatribe, he or she also know, of course you're going to say that.
They just look through the
right,
crap.
especially family law courts, right?
Yeah.
And I would easily sit there and go, okay, it's the first thing he would say to me is, my wife's crazy. She takes antidepressants.
Yep.
And my answer after a few years would be to him, I would take antidepressants too if I was your wife. Like, it makes perfect sense why she's taking antidepressants, because you're freaking nuts, and the way you treat her is traumatic, right? And you'd see all the hallmarks of PTSD in this woman because she is basically jailed with her captor, right? And so it's prisoner of war stuff, and it's same symptoms. But we would never question the prisoner of war, right, for the psychological damage they have, but we question the domestic violence victim in that space. And you add children to the matter, and it was the fact that the number one reason why women don't leave highly violent domestic relationships was because of their kids. Yep. The number two was fear of death. Yeah. Right? Fear of death was number two. And it just shows you what a mother is, a real mother is. And so these women are putting themselves in really horrific situations, believing that for the sake of their kids, they shouldn't go. When the challenge was for us in the DV services to convince them, for your kids, you need to get the hell out of there. Yep. And that's the mind shift you need to change. And that's when women will leave. When they believe it's for the benefit of their child, they will go.
Yep. I think, look, from my own perspective as well in that DV, bail, AVO world, just because you've got the offenders being charged and they've got bail, just because they've got DV history now and an AVO, don't leave it to the law to be the ones to protect you.
Yeah.
You have to cease contact. You have to report when there's any issues, even the slightest issue, or at least seek some understanding from a DVLO or a frontline service worker or someone who speaks to the police or knows the legislation or your lawyer or whatever, so you know what's an offence and how to move forward with that and how to do that quickly. But also, look, you've got to be aware. You've got to change up your movements and do things like that. If you've ever got a belief that they're going to try to find you and track you down, as hard as that is, you've got to do whatever you can to protect yourself as well and seek out that service. And look, we have a relationship with a lot of, I want to put that out there, at Precision Integrity, we have a relationship with a few frontline DV providers. So if you need our help with security risk management, consulting, things like that, understanding, look, maybe your phone's being hacked or something else, we have a reduced fee structure because you come in through one of those services, and they will pay for it for you. So look, go and seek out that help. There are people like us that want to help you, and can help you and can give you strategies and help you move in a way that gives you confidence, safety, and will make it that much more difficult for an offender to find you.
Because the biggest thing for domestic violence survivors is that what comes first needs to be safety planning.
Yes.
They absolutely have to know that they're going to be okay post separation, right? And a good DV practitioner, the first thing they will do is seek to allay the fears of what's the worst.
Yep.
Right, and you got to have that conversation. And okay, right now, what's the biggest thing in your life right now? Or what if he kills me? What if he takes my kids? What if he does this? What if he does that? And okay, let's break that down and let's going to put all these measures in place to make sure that can never happen.
Yep.
And those are the conversations you need to have really early in the piece, because if you don't address the biggest fears that they have, everything else is like housing, financial, AVOs, all of that is going to mean nothing if the person is terrified of the worst happening to them. And they're going to see everything as an agitation factor. The difference is on our side, we know most of these guys are just like weak as, right? But they have done a terror installment plan for so many years that they know exactly how to do it, right? So to that victim, and like you said before, these people know how to channel, who they can play with and who they can't. And what I used to get annoyed at is people would say, well, why don't they just go to anger management? My friend, these people could teach you anger management, right? Yeah. These people not need anger management classes. They are PhDs in anger management, because they don't get angry at the boss, they don't get angry at the neighbor. They know to only channel their rage towards someone who will never open their mouth back and tell anybody, or even if they do, they won't be believed, and hence why the isolation tactic works. So this is a complete mindset change you're looking for. You're looking, how do I change his view that she is not your property? This is an equal person with their own human rights. And unless you do that, all the papers in the world aren't going to change the way he thinks. It might manage his behaviour in terms of what he will do, purely because you're an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Right? Because nobody wants to get, oh my God, the cops come to my door, that looks bad for my reputation. Because these guys care about their rep if they're a type 2 offender. They care about their reputation. They care about their workplace. They care about their successes in life and what they're going to achieve. So anything that's a hindrance to that is a problem. So I'm better off doing it in a way that's more clandestine, that's not going to get me in trouble. Because an AVO on my name isn't going to be great. Or definitely a breach of AVO won't be good for me, because now it's a crime and I'm going to be locked up. And it's all this stuff that works against the wonderful image of who I purport to be, because we don't want the people to know the real me.
Guys, well, look, I hope that's been a little bit enlightening for those. If you're listening to this and you've been a victim or are a victim of domestic violence, please seek some assistance from one of the frontline support services. If you don't know who they are, where they are, or you want some advice from us, you can find us at privateinvestigatorsydney.com.au. Please feel free to fill in a contact form, email us or call us, and you can even put on there the times that are suitable for us to call or contact you back, or an email that we can get to you that's safe. And we would be more than happy to try to offer you some advice or connect you with the right people.
Those in serious domestic violence situations, the best thing you can do is seek an appointment with your GP, some place you can talk privately and in confidence, and your GP will have the resources available to refer you to the right places.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'd like to finish up and thank our wonderful sponsors, as always, ourselves, Precision Integrity, which is found at privateinvestigatorsydney.com.au. I'll get that right one day.
And IC Technology, ictechnology.com.au, for all things managed IT services.
Have a safe week, people, and you will hear from us, or you will see us next week. And thanks, Jen, our lovely producer, sitting there who's nearly falling asleep.
Wake up, Jen!
Bye. See you guys. And she's waving.